The crowd was already chanting when the first noose tightened around a human throat. The sound wasn't a cheer, it was hunger. Thousands of alien voices, layered and raw, echoed across the execution square like the growl of some monstrous beast. They had come not to witness justice, not to see law carried out, but to feed on humiliation. Today, the Galactic Empire promised them a spectacle. The public hanging of 50 human women, each accused of crimes they had never committed. 50 lives, 50 bodies, 50 lessons the Empire wanted carved into the memory of every world. Above the platform, banners of the Empire rippled in a hot wind. They weren't cloth, but metal-threaded sheets that shimmered with holographic light, each one displaying the same ruthless message. Defiance will be extinguished. The words pulsed in bright imperial red, repeating every few seconds, as though the Empire feared the crowd might forget the lesson before the hangings began. The square itself was a brutal arena of stone and steel. The gallows stretched across its heart, mechanical scaffolds rising high, each fitted with a single noose made from woven alloy fibers. No ordinary rope would do. The Empire wanted precision, efficiency, certainty. When the lever was pulled, each noose would tighten instantly, snapping the necks of its victims with cold finality. And yet, as the condemned were lined up beneath the gallows, the crowd realized something strange. The humans were not crying. Some of them were bruised, their uniforms torn from interrogation, their wrists bound so tightly that blood dripped from raw skin. But their eyes burned with something dangerous. Captain Leona Vega stood at the center of the line, her face streaked with dried blood, her short black hair clinging to her temples in the heat. She was no stranger to pain, no stranger to loss, and certainly no stranger to the Empire's cruelty. But she would not, could not, allow her people to die like lambs. Her voice, soft but steady, slipped between the women on either side of her. Listen to me. They want us broken. They want us crawling in fear. But we are not theirs to break. The woman to her right, an engineer from the Luna colonies, breathed hard, her lips trembling. The woman to her left, a farmer from the Martian frontier, closed her eyes, clutching at her bound wrists. And yet when Leona spoke, they both straightened. The words weren't loud enough for the crowd to hear, but they carried something far more powerful than volume: defiance. The guards, armored brutes of reptilian descent, shoved the women into position. Heavy talons clamped their shoulders, forcing them beneath the gallows. One guard sneered in broken Terran tongue. "Look down. Show respect." Leona's head snapped upward, chin raised, eyes blazing at the holographic banners. She refused to lower her gaze. Others followed, one by one, until 50 pairs of human eyes were staring directly into the Empire's spectacle, not as victims, but as witnesses. That single act unsettled the crowd. The jeers faltered, thinning into uneasy murmurs. These humans weren't begging. They weren't screaming. They weren't even trembling. They were standing tall. The executioner emerged then, and the air grew heavier. He was not a mere soldier. He was a creature bred and chosen for this role, a hulking insectoid monstrosity whose exoskeleton gleamed like blackened iron. 2 pairs of serrated mandibles clacked as he moved, his 6 limbs carrying him with deliberate weight. In one hand he held a ceremonial blade, long and curved, its edge coated in reflective toxin. In the other, he gripped the master lever that would release the gallows. Everywhere he went, silence followed. The crowd respected him, feared him, adored him. He was execution incarnate, the hand of the Empire given flesh. Stopping before the prisoners, the executioner raised his blade high. His voice, amplified through the square's comms, cut like metal scraping stone. These women stand guilty of treason against the Galactic Empire. They resisted occupation. They armed rebels. They spread lies of human strength. Today, their deaths prove the truth. Humanity kneels. The crowd roared, a tidal wave of sound that shook the very walls. The executioner turned toward the prisoners, his mandibles clicking in amusement as he studied them one by one. He stopped before Leona, tilting his monstrous head as if intrigued by her defiance. Lowering the blade until its edge nearly touched her throat, he hissed, "Any final words, human?" Leona's lips parted, but not in fear, not in surrender. Her voice rang out, raw and unwavering. "We are not the ones kneeling." A ripple moved through the women, their shoulders straightening, their jaws tightening. 50 voices rose together, not in song, not in prayer, but in a defiant chant that drowned out the jeers. Earth lives. Earth fights. Earth rises. The chant grew, louder and louder, their words striking the air like hammers. The crowd shouted back, some enraged, others unsettled, but none able to ignore it. The executioner's mandibles flared in irritation. His claw slammed against the lever, preparing to silence them once and for all. The prisoners didn't flinch. Leona Vega looked into the sea of alien faces and smiled. She knew something the executioner didn't. She knew something the Empire, in all its arrogance, had overlooked. The square was surrounded not only by alien citizens, but also by shadows. Shadows that moved where no light should shift. Figures cloaked in obscurity, slipping silently between the crowd. They were there, waiting, watching, ready. The Empire believed this execution would end humanity's spirit. But Leona knew this was only the beginning. And when the lever fell, history would change forever. The executioner's claw tightened on the lever, but before it fell, a different sound cut through the chaos. It wasn't the scream of a prisoner. It wasn't the cheer of the crowd. It was a voice, calm, sharp, and amplified through the very speakers the Empire used to spread fear. Citizens of the Empire, today you came to watch death. Instead, you will witness your masters bleed. Every alien head turned. Every soldier stiffened. The executioner froze, mandibles twitching in confusion. The broadcast system had been locked, secured by Imperial codes impossible to crack, or so they believed. Yet now it carried a human voice, a voice dripping with iron certainty. And in that instant, the atmosphere of the square changed. For weeks, for months, whispers had circled across conquered systems, whispers of humans who didn't die when the Empire ordered it. Humans who moved unseen, striking from shadows, leaving only ruin in their wake. The Empire dismissed them as myths, lies spread by desperate rebels clinging to hope. But now, as that voice echoed across the square, the myth took shape. From the rear of the audience, a figure shifted. Cloaked in a dull merchant's robe, he had been invisible among the crowd. Now he lowered his hood. Beneath it, his eyes blazed with defiance, and his hands, once empty, revealed the cold glint of a plasma sidearm. He wasn't alone. All around the square, more figures shed their disguises. A vendor dropped his crate of fruit, revealing a rifle concealed beneath false panels. A hunched beggar straightened, peeling away ragged rags to expose armor scarred by battles long thought lost. A pair of cloaked women slipped their hands from sleeves, and in each palm rested detonators shaped like simple trinkets. The Shadow Legion had arrived. To the untrained eye, they looked like outlaws. But to those who knew history, true history, they were something far greater. These were the survivors of Earth's hidden war, the soldiers who refused to surrender when the Empire burned their cities and shattered their fleets. They were men and women forged in fire, trained in silence, patient as wolves, waiting for the moment when their strike would echo loud enough for the galaxy to hear. That moment was now. The first explosion ripped through the execution square, tearing apart a line of Imperial soldiers who had been guarding the perimeter. The blast didn't just kill them, it shattered the illusion of control. Stone and steel rained down, smoke billowed skyward, and the crowd of alien civilians screamed in panic. Guards scrambled, barking orders in a dozen alien tongues. Some raised weapons toward the Shadow Legion, but more turned their aim toward the condemned women on the gallows, eager to finish the execution before rebellion could take root. But they were already too late. Captain Leona Vega saw the explosion, and her heart surged with savage pride. She had prayed the whispers were true, that the Legion was still alive, still watching. Now, as she locked eyes with the unmasked soldier in the crowd, she knew she wasn't abandoned. "Now!" she shouted to the women beside her. "Fight for every breath!" As if on cue, one of the cloaked rebels hurled a small metallic sphere onto the platform. It burst with a blinding flash, not deadly but dazzling, and the reptilian guards staggered back, their vision stolen by searing light. Leona lunged, twisting her bound wrists against the distracted guard nearest her. She slammed her shoulder into his chest, knocking him backward, and in the chaos his plasma rifle clattered across the wooden boards of the gallows. Her hands were still chained, but desperation makes a weapon of anything. She seized the rifle, spun it, and slammed the buttstock into the guard's throat. He collapsed, choking, as Leona turned the rifle toward the executioner himself. The insectoid giant recoiled, mandibles clicking furiously. For the first time, he looked uncertain. The other prisoners caught fire from her example. They fought with chains, with elbows, with teeth. The farmer from Mars headbutted a guard hard enough to crack scales. The engineer from Luna used her bonds to strangle her captor, wrapping the chain around his throat until he dropped. One by one, the condemned became combatants. And all the while, the Shadow Legion poured fire into the square. Plasma bolts lit the smoke like lightning strikes. Alien soldiers dropped in droves, their formations broken, their discipline unraveling. The civilians trampled one another in terror, scattering into the alleys of the city. The Empire had expected a performance of domination. What they received was the beginning of a war. At the center of it all, the voice returned, louder, firmer, undeniable. The Empire thinks humanity kneels. Today, they learn we rise. Another explosion ripped through the north gate. Then another at the armory entrance. One by one, every escape route the Empire had built for itself became a death trap. The Shadow Legion had planned this for months, every blast perfectly placed, every shot precisely timed. The executioner roared, slamming his clawed feet against the platform, shaking it with brute force. He didn't understand subtlety. He didn't care about whispers in crowds or rebels in disguise. His world was simple. Kill the prisoners, silence the defiance, restore the Empire's control. He raised his monstrous blade high, ready to end Leona's life with one swing, even if the noose failed. His mandibles spread wide in triumph. But before he could strike, another shadow moved. A hooded figure slipped through the smoke behind him, silent as the grave. No one in the crowd saw it. No soldier turned in time. The executioner himself was too focused on his prey to notice the glint of steel that rose at his back. The whisper that had haunted the square was about to become flesh and blood and death. The Empire had staged a spectacle to prove humanity's defeat. Instead, it had gathered its people to witness the birth of their terror. And this was only the beginning. The first head exploded before the executioner's blade could fall. A plasma bolt tore through the smoke, hitting an Imperial officer square between his eyes. His body collapsed like a puppet with its strings cut, and suddenly the execution square was no longer a stage. It was a battlefield. Panic rippled outward. Civilians screamed, pushing over one another in their desperation to flee. Alien soldiers shouted conflicting orders in their guttural languages, scrambling to form ranks that crumbled as quickly as they were made. The clean, rehearsed theater of death the Empire had prepared dissolved into raw chaos within seconds. And in the chaos, humanity thrived. The Shadow Legion struck like predators, darting through smoke and flame. One rebel vaulted atop a stall, firing burst after burst into the clustered guards below. Another rolled a plasma charge into the feet of a squad, the blast turning their armored bodies into molten shrapnel that ripped through their own comrades. Every shot, every move, every detonation had been rehearsed in the shadows. This wasn't luck. It was war crafted with precision. Captain Leona Vega ducked beneath the scaffolds as a bolt hissed past her head, so close she felt its heat graze her cheek. Her hands were still bound, the chain cutting into her wrists, but she refused to wait for rescue. With a snarl, she slammed her wrists against the jagged edge of a fallen support beam. The pain was blinding, but the chain snapped. Free, finally free. Leona seized the plasma rifle she had pried from her guard moments earlier. She braced it against her shoulder and unleashed a burst of fire into the aliens storming the gallows. 3 dropped instantly. A 4th staggered back, his chest plate smoking, before a blade from one of the freed women cut him down completely. Around her, the other prisoners fought with desperation sharpened into fury. A woman from the Titan colonies used her chains like a flail, smashing them into the skull of an alien soldier until bone and metal cracked. Another, no older than 19, snatched up a fallen sidearm and fired wildly, her shots clumsy but devastating at close range. 50 prisoners had been meant to hang. Now 50 warriors were rising in their place. The executioner roared above the din, his mandibles flaring wide, his body towering over the battlefield. He swung his ceremonial blade in wide arcs, each strike cleaving through stone and flesh alike. Rebels scattered before him, even the Shadow Legion cautious of his size and reach. He was a monster designed for terror, and for a moment he seemed unstoppable. Leona refused to yield. She climbed the collapsed scaffolding, plasma rifle raised, eyes locked on the executioner. "Over here, you insect bastard!" she shouted. Her voice cut through the chaos, drawing his furious gaze. The giant lunged, swinging his blade with enough force to split the platform in 2. Leona dove aside, rolling across splintered boards as the blade slammed down where she had stood. The shockwave rattled her bones, but she held the rifle firm and fired point-blank into the executioner's armored chest. The shot staggered him. Not a kill, but enough to make him reel. The crowd gasped, those who had not yet fled now caught between terror and awe. The image burned across every broadcast, a human woman, once a condemned prisoner, now standing against the very executioner meant to end her life. And the galaxy was watching. Meanwhile, the Shadow Legion pressed the attack. Explosives tore through the south gate, cutting off reinforcements. Snipers hidden in the upper balconies of the square picked off officers one by one, sowing chaos in the chain of command. The rebels moved with purpose, not just to kill, but to show the Empire that control had slipped from their iron grip. The condemned women, once silent and shackled, became part of the Legion's fury. They fought shoulder to shoulder with their rescuers, turning their humiliation into vengeance. Blood smeared their faces, chains clattered against steel, and their voices rose above the din, not screams of fear, but battle cries. Leona fired again, another burst slamming into the executioner's chest. His armor cracked, ichor spraying in thick streams. He bellowed in rage, mandibles snapping as he charged her once more. His blade swung low, and she barely leapt clear as it carved a crater into the stone at her feet. She stumbled, rifle nearly wrenched from her hands. The executioner loomed over her, shadow blotting out the fire-lit sky. He raised his blade for the killing strike. And then, from behind him, a figure moved through the smoke. Silent, swift, precise. The same shadow who had cut into the broadcast now cut into the battlefield itself. A curved blade flashed in the firelight, and with a single fluid stroke, it swept clean through the executioner's thick neck. For a heartbeat, time froze. The executioner's mandibles clicked one final broken rhythm. His blade fell from his claws, and then his head separated, tumbling to the ground in a spray of black ichor. It rolled across the platform, bouncing once, twice, before landing at the feet of the stunned soldiers. The body collapsed with a crash that shook the gallows, the platform trembling under his massive weight. Silence spread across the battlefield, not from peace, but from shock. Leona rose slowly, blood and sweat streaking her face, her rifle still in hand. She looked at the fallen monster, then at the soldiers frozen around her. Her voice rang out like thunder. "You tried to hang us! You failed. You tried to break us. You failed. And now you will fear us." The freed women echoed her cry, their voices uniting into a roar that rolled across the square. The Shadow Legion took it up as well, their chants reverberating against stone and steel. The Empire had gathered the galaxy to watch humanity die. Instead, they had given it the sight of humanity reborn in fire, and the flames were only beginning to spread. The executioner's head hit the ground with a sound no one could forget. It didn't thud like stone, didn't crack like glass. It rolled, slow, deliberate, grotesque, bouncing twice before settling against the boots of an alien officer. Black ichor oozed from its severed neck, pooling in the cracks of the execution square, staining the stones that had been meant to drink human blood. And in that moment, the galaxy saw something it had never seen before. Fear in the eyes of the Empire. The silence that followed was sharper than any blade. Thousands of alien civilians, who had moments ago been screaming for human death, now stood frozen, their mouths open, their voices stolen. Soldiers, trained to march without hesitation, stared in disbelief at the twitching body of the giant that had been their symbol of dominion. Even the banners above, glowing with the words, "Defiance will be extinguished," seemed smaller, weaker, their message hollowed by the sight of their executioner headless in the dirt. Leona Vega wiped ichor from her cheek with the back of her hand. She didn't lower her rifle. She didn't breathe relief. Instead, she took one step forward, planting her boot against the executioner's fallen blade, and lifted her voice so the comms, still hacked by the Shadow Legion, would carry it across every screen. "You brought us here to be broken," she said, her voice cutting through the square. "But look at us now! We are still standing, and your monster lies in the dirt." The 50 women, once shackled, raised their voices with her, a defiant roar that rolled like thunder. The Shadow Legion joined, their chants pounding the air like drums of war. The sound shook the square to its foundations, drowning out the last flicker of the crowd's courage. And then the fear began to spread. Alien soldiers, their discipline unraveling, exchanged uneasy glances. They had been promised a spectacle of control, a reminder that the Empire ruled without question. Instead, they saw chaos. Instead, they saw humans armed, fighting, refusing to die. They saw their executioner, a creature they had believed unstoppable, reduced to nothing more than a headless corpse. Doubt crept into their ranks, and doubt was more lethal than any blade. Leona seized the moment. "Take their weapons," she ordered, pointing to the fallen guards. "Arm yourselves!" Fight. The prisoners didn't hesitate. They tore rifles from dead hands, ripped pistols from twitching claws, and even lifted the curved blades of alien soldiers who had been too slow to defend themselves. Chains clattered to the ground as the last of their bonds were broken. What had begun as an execution line was now an armed resistance. The battle reignited. Plasma bolts screamed across the square. Explosions cracked the sky. Smoke twisted into towering columns as the Shadow Legion pressed their assault, cutting down squads of alien soldiers who fought harder now but still with desperation tainting their every move. The civilians fled in stampedes, their shrieks echoing through the city streets. The spectacle the Empire had designed was collapsing into legend, one the galaxy would whisper about for centuries. Amid the chaos, The mysterious figure who had beheaded the executioner stepped into the light. His cloak, torn by combat, revealed armor unlike any worn by the others, dark, angular, almost predatory in design. His face was hidden behind a visor, but when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of a grave. "The head is only the beginning," he said. "The Empire thinks it owns this galaxy. Tonight, it learns it has enemies it cannot kill." Some of the prisoners froze at the sight of him. They had heard rumors, whispers of a human who had become the Empire's nightmare, a blade in the dark that never missed. The aliens called him the Ghost. Humans called him something simpler, something older. They called him Vengeance. Leona met his gaze, her rifle still steady in her hands. She didn't ask his name. She didn't need to. His presence was proof enough that humanity was far from finished. With the Ghost at their side, the tide of battle turned. Alien officers barked frantic commands, ordering their troops to hold the line, but their formations shattered beneath the relentless advance. Every shot from the Legion was true. Every move was calculated. They weren't just fighting to survive, they were fighting to humiliate, to tear the Empire's pride apart stone by stone, soldier by soldier. Leona climbed the scaffold, raising her rifle high above the battlefield. "Look at them!" she shouted, pointing at the retreating soldiers. "They call themselves rulers, but they are running from the people they tried to hang." The women roared with her, firing into the fleeing ranks. The square became a slaughterhouse, not of helpless humans, but of arrogant oppressors. Black ichor and alien blood slicked the stones where Gallows had stood, and still the comms broadcast it all. Across the stars, conquered colonies and hidden resistance cells watched in awe. They saw the Empire falter, they saw humanity rise, and in their hearts, seeds of rebellion took root. But victory was not yet complete. A deep rumble shook the square as heavy vehicles approached, reinforcements rolling in with the weight of the Empire's war machine. From the eastern gate, armored carriers surged forward, their cannons swiveling to unleash death. Soldiers poured out by the dozens, more disciplined than the broken garrison, their armor gleaming, their weapons charged. The Empire wasn't surrendering. It was rallying. Leona gritted her teeth, raising her rifle again. "They think more bodies will save them." "Let's prove them wrong." The Ghost stepped to her side, his blade dripping black ichor. "Then we bleed them dry." The Shadow Legion repositioned, planting explosives along the flanks, snipers retreating to higher ground. The freed women braced themselves, rifles in hand, their eyes blazing with fire instead of fear. The square was silent, too silent. Not the silence of peace, nor the silence of fear, but that dangerous pause that comes when an entire galaxy holds its breath, waiting for the storm to break. The execution platform still glistened with the black blood of the alien who had dared to lift a blade against human women. His severed head lay where it had rolled, its lifeless eyes staring blankly into the crowd as if even in death it couldn't comprehend what had happened. And yet, every soul gathered there understood perfectly. The Galactic Empire's authority had cracked. What was once unshakable had just been shattered by humans. The rope that was meant for the women swayed uselessly in the cold breeze, like a broken symbol of the Empire's power. 50 pairs of eyes looked outward from the platform. Eyes that had been resigned to death minutes ago, now lit with a fire no chains could smother. The people of Earth had endured slavery, exile, and mockery. But this moment? This was different. This was the spark. Whispers rippled through the crowd of alien dignitaries and soldiers. Some muttered of impossibility. Others stammered that the executioner's fall was some kind of sabotage, an accident, a trick. Yet none could erase the truth carved into reality. Humans had refused to bow. And when humanity refuses, empires fall. From the platform, Captain Rhea stepped forward, her boots crunching on stone slick with alien blood. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to exist in this story as anything more than a victim. But now, Her presence radiated like a signal flare. Her voice cut through the silence like steel. "You were promised a spectacle," she declared, her words carrying with unnatural weight across the square. "And you got one. But mark this moment well. It is not the execution of women you will remember. It is the executioner's fall. It is the first crack in your empire. And I promise you, Earth will not stop here." The roar that followed wasn't from humans alone. Among the alien audience, buried dissenters raised their voices too. For centuries, the Galactic Empire had ruled by fear, its armies and war machines silencing all who questioned it. But in a single instant, 50 unarmed women had become a symbol stronger than fleets. Symbols cannot be killed with swords. The alien governor overseeing the event, a towering insectoid figure with chittering mandibles, scrambled to regain control. Its voice screeched across the square, ordering soldiers to raise weapons, to fire upon the humans before the spark turned into fire. But hesitation spread through the ranks. The soldiers had seen what everyone else had: the head of the executioner, once a feared enforcer, lying still at their feet. They didn't want to be next. That hesitation gave humanity its opening. Rhea raised her hand. "Now!" From the edges of the square, hidden operatives moved like shadows unleashed. They had waited for this moment, calculated every second, planned every step. Explosives rigged beneath alien banners erupted, tearing down the Empire's insignias in a storm of fire and smoke. The sky filled with drones, commandeered by human hackers, turning the Empire's own surveillance tools into weapons against it. The crowd erupted into chaos, but not the chaos of disorder. It was the chaos of an uprising. The 50 women, once prisoners, now tore off their shackles. Some grabbed weapons from fallen guards, others stood tall with nothing but their fists. Yet every single one looked transformed. They were no longer victims. They were living declarations of resistance. And then, like thunder answering lightning, the sky itself split open. Above the city, a massive human warship decloaked, its hull scarred from battles past, its presence radiating raw defiance. The Empire had declared that Earth's fleets were destroyed, that humanity was broken and scattered. But the shadow now cast across the square told another story. Humanity's warships were not gone. They had been waiting, watching, preparing. And now, they had come home. Gasps swept across the alien nobility. Some fell to their knees, others fled outright. For centuries they had spoken of humanity as a conquered species, a broken people. Now they realized they were staring at the face of their worst nightmare. Not extinction, not silence, but rebellion. The warship's cannons angled downward, glowing with restrained power. The message was clear without a single word. The executions would end, the oppression would end, and if the Empire wished to test humanity again, it would be the Empire's blood staining the ground next. Rhea turned back to the crowd. "You wanted to hang us as a warning," she said, her voice steady, fierce, alive. "But today, you are warned. Humanity is not done. Humanity does not break. And humanity will not kneel." The square erupted, not with the cries of despair the governor had planned for, but with the cheers of defiance. Aliens who had cowered for lifetimes shouted their support. Humans scattered across the galaxy, hearing the broadcast hacked into every channel, lifted their heads in hope. Across 1,000 worlds, the image of the executioner's head lying at the feet of human women became the spark of a movement. The Empire had tried to make an example of Earth. Instead, Earth had made an example of the Empire. From that day forward, no one looked at humanity the same way again. Because history is not written by the powerful when the powerless refuse to die quietly. It is written in the roar of those who rise, in the fire of those who refuse chains, and in the blood of those who thought themselves untouchable. And so began the war the galaxy would never forget. The war sparked not by armies or admirals, but by 50 women who stood against the noose and turned the hangman into history. Humanity had been underestimated for the last time.